Welcome to what might be the most financially focused deep dive into the wizarding world you'll experience today. We're tackling the question that's probably crossed your mind at least once while reading the books or watching the films. How in Merlin's name is Harry Potter absolutely loaded? I mean, think about it. The kid's an orphan. He grew up sleeping in a cupboard under the stairs, wearing his cousin's hand-me-down clothes that could fit three of him. His aunt and uncle treated him like an unpaid house elf. And yet, the moment Hagrid escorts him to Gringotts Wizarding Bank, we discover that Harry's Vault 687, for those keeping track, is practically overflowing with more gold than a dragon's hoard. We're talking mounds of gold galleons, columns of silver sickles, and heaps of bronze canutes. It's like someone won the lottery and then forgot to tell Harry about it for 11 years. Meanwhile, the Weasleys, a pure-blood wizarding family, have exactly one galleon rattling around in their vault. The disparity is frankly bonkers when you think about it. So let's unpack this financial mystery, shall we? Because the answer involves medieval wizards, magical hair products, and J.K. Rowling's own very relatable money struggles. Let's set the scene. It's Harry's first trip to Diagon Alley, and he's understandably concerned about, how he's going to pay for all this wizard stuff. He asks Hagrid, with all the innocence of someone who's never had two knuts to rub together,
"But Hagrid, how am I to pay for all this? I haven't any money."
"Oh, Harry, sweet, oblivious Harry, if only you knew. When the Goblin Griphook unlocks Vault 687, green smoke billows out like something from a particularly dramatic magic show, and then Harry sees it." The passage from the book reads, "Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts," and Hagrid, in perhaps the understatement of the century, simply says, "All yours." When this scene was brought to life in the 2001 film adaptation, we finally got to witness exactly what Harry saw. And let me tell you, the special effects team did not hold back. The vault looks like Scrooge McDuck's money bin, except instead of a cartoon duck swimming through it, we have a traumatised 11-year-old trying to process the fact that he's apparently a millionaire. The visual is genuinely jaw-dropping, and it perfectly captures the sheer magnitude of the Potter family fortune. So yeah, Harry's loaded, but where did all this gold come from? His parents were 21 years old when they died. 21! That's barely out of university age in our world. Most 21-year-olds today are drowning in student debt and eating ramen for dinner, not leaving small fortunes to their children. The math doesn't exactly add up at first glance. Here's the thing. Harry didn't get rich because his parents won the lottery or discovered a gold mine. This was generational wealth, baby. We're talking old money, the kind that's been accumulating interest, literally and figuratively, for centuries. And it almost entirely came from James Potter's side of the family. Lily Evans, Harry's mother, was Muggle-born. There's no evidence that her family had any significant wealth to contribute to the Potter coffers. The Evans family seems to have been solidly middle class at best, which makes sense given that Lily's sister Petunia and her husband Vernon represent the most aggressively average suburban existence imaginable. So no, the money didn't come from the Evans side. The Potter fortune has a much more interesting origin story, one that starts in the 12th century with a wizard who sounds like he walked straight out of a medieval fairy tale, Linfred of Stinchcombe. Now that's already an amazing name, but his nickname was even better, the Potterer. Yeah, you read that right. Over time, Potterer got corrupted into Potter, which means the entire family name is basically derived from what the neighbours thought was a harmless old man pottering around his garden. Little did those Muggle neighbours know that Linfred was actually running what we'd today call a very successful pharmaceutical startup. See, the Muggles would call upon Linfred for medicinal services. He was the local healer, the go-to guy for when you had pox or ague or any other delightfully medieval ailment. They thought his cures were just really, really good herbal remedies. They had no idea these were actually magical potions. Classic statute of secrecy in action, centuries before it was even officially a thing. Behind closed doors, Linfred was conducting experiments that would lay the foundation for the Potter family fortune. And we're not talking about some fly-by-night snake oil operation here. Historians credit Linfred as the originator of remedies that evolved into potions still used in Harry's time. We're talking about legitimate lasting contributions to magical medicine. The two big winners from Linfred's laboratory were Scaly Grow and Pepper Up Potion. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you absolutely recognise Scaly Grow. It's the horrifically painful potion that Madame Pomfrey gives Harry in Chamber of Secrets after that fraud Gilderoy Lockhart accidentally removes all the bones from his arm instead of, fixing it. The stuff tastes absolutely dreadful and makes you feel like large splinters are being jammed into your body, but it does the impossible. It regrows missing bones and repairs broken ones completely. Think about that for a second. In our world, if you break a bone, you're looking at weeks or months of healing time, possibly surgery. Definitely some kind of cast or immobilization. In the wizarding world, you drink some horrible tasting liquid, endure a night of feeling like your skeleton is rebelling against you, and wake up completely healed. The demand for something like that would be astronomical. Every wizard who plays Quidditch, every aura in a dangerous situation, every clumsy witch tripping over her own robes. They all need Scaly Grow at some point. Then there's Pepper Up Potion, which cures the common cold. The only side effect is that steam comes out of your ears for a few hours, which honestly seems like a fair trade for immediately feeling better. We see this potion used during the Tri-Wizard tournament in February 1995 when the hostages who'd been underwater in the Great Lake needed warming up. But you have to imagine this potion gets used constantly. It's literally a cure for one of the most common ailments in existence. Every wizard who catches a cold doesn't have to suffer through it or wait for it to run its course. They just drink some Pepper Up and get on with their day, steam ears and all. Now, here's where the generational wealth really starts to make sense. Linfred created these potions in the 12th century. That means the Potter family has been selling these remedies for approximately 800 years. Even if the profit margins weren't huge, even if they were just making a modest income from sales, we're talking about centuries of accumulated wealth. It's like if your family had invented aspirin in the 1200s and you were still collecting royalties today. The compound interest alone would be mind-boggling. According to Pottermore, Linfred's sales of these cures enabled him to leave a significant pile of gold to each of his 7 children upon his death. 7 children, each getting a significant inheritance. That's not just successful, that's we need to diversify our portfolio successful. And the family didn't stop there. Continued to be successful for several generations, each one adding to the family coffers through hard work and what's described as the quiet brand of ingenuity that had characterised their forebear Linfred. They typically married their neighbours, occasionally muggles, which is kind of progressive for pure-blood wizard families, and lived in the west of England. They were clearly doing something right, because occasionally a Potter would make it all the way to London, which in the wizarding world seems to be a big deal. 2 Potters even sat on the Wizengamot, which is basically the wizarding world's Supreme Court, and Parliament rolled into one. Ralston Potter served from 1612 to 1652 and was a major supporter of the Statute of Secrecy. This is particularly interesting because he opposed the more militant members who wanted to declare war on Muggles. Ralston was basically saying, hey, maybe let's not start a magical genocide. Maybe let's just keep things secret and peaceful. Revolutionary thinking for his time, apparently. Then there was Henry Potter, Harry to his intimates, which must have been confusing at family gatherings centuries later. Henry also served on the Wizengamot and continued the family tradition of being relatively influential in magical society. The Potters weren't just rich. They were respectable, accomplished, and consistently contributing members of wizarding society. But here's where things really explode financially. Enter Fleamont Potter, Harry's paternal grandfather and the father of James Potter. Fleamont is the MVP of Potter family wealth accumulation. And here's why. He took the already substantial family fortune and quadrupled it. Not doubled, quadrupled. He quadrupled the family wealth in a single generation. How? By creating the family's most famous potion to date. Sleek Easy's hair potion. I know what you're thinking. Hair potion? Really? That's what took the Potters from wealthy to obscenely wealthy? But hear me out, because this actually makes perfect business sense. Sleek Easy's hair potion was marketed with the slogan, 2 drops tame even the most bothersome barnet. It was essentially magical hair gel that could tame any unruly hair and style it sleekly and fashionably. And before you dismiss this as frivolous, remember, Hermione Granger used this stuff to prepare for the Yule Ball with Victor Crumb. Hermione, who normally couldn't care less about her appearance and had notoriously bushy hair, used Sleek Easies for one of the most important social events of her teenage life. Think about the market for this product. Every witch and wizard with difficult hair, and given that the Potter family itself is characterised by messy, unruly hair, would want this potion. Unlike Scaly Grow, which you hopefully only need occasionally when you break something, or Pepper Up Potion, which you only need when you're sick, Sleek Easies is something people might use daily or weekly. It's a cosmetic product, and cosmetic products are repeat purchases. The business model is absolutely brilliant. Fleamont essentially pivoted the family business from medical potions to beauty products, and in doing so, he tapped into a market that's enormous in any world, magical or not. The beauty industry is one of the most profitable sectors in our economy, and apparently the same is true in the wizarding world. By the time Fleamont passed away, he'd turned the Potter family from comfortable old money to swimming in galleons wealthy. Now here's where the timeline gets a bit tragic. Fleamont Potter lived long enough to see his son James marry Lily Evans, and he even knew that he had a grandson named Harry. But Fleamont died of dragonpox, along with his wife Euphemia, shortly after Harry's birth. They were elderly by wizard standards and had essentially gotten their affairs in order, knowing that James and his young family would inherit everything. Then, of course, barely a year later, James and Lily were murdered by Voldemort. James was 21, Lily was 21. They'd barely had time to enjoy the Potter fortune themselves before they died protecting their son. At that point, everything, centuries of accumulated wealth, Fleamont's quadrupled fortune, all of it, passed to 1-year-old Harry Potter. So when Hagrid takes Harry to Gringotts 10 years later, that vault has been sitting there, untouched except for what Dumbledore withdrew to pay for Harry's basic needs at the Dursleys, which they never acknowledged, accumulating whatever the wizarding equivalent of interest is. No wonder it's overflowing. Now here's where we enter speculation territory, but I think it's worth considering. The canonical explanation for Harry's wealth, generations of Potter family success in the potion business, is solid and completely accounts for his fortune. But there's a theory that suggests the fortune might have grown even larger after October 31st, 1981, when Voldemort was defeated. Think about it from the perspective of the average witch or wizard in 1981. The wizarding world had been living in terror for years. People were disappearing, families were being murdered, no one knew who to trust because of the Imperious Curse. Then suddenly, miraculously, Voldemort is gone, defeated by a baby whose parents sacrificed their lives to protect him. The entire wizarding world knew what happened that night. They knew Harry was orphaned. They knew he was the boy who lived. And while the exact size of the Potter fortune wouldn't have been public knowledge, wealthy families generally don't publish their bank statements. The general wizarding population might have assumed that this orphaned child had been left with nothing. No parents, possibly no money. Just a lightning bolt scar and a destiny he didn't ask for. Is it really so far-fetched to imagine that thousands of witches and wizards, overcome with gratitude and sympathy, donated to Harry? We're talking about a society that had just been freed from a reign of terror. People were celebrating in the streets. Muggles even noticed something strange was happening. The collective euphoria and relief would have been immense. And when people feel grateful, they often want to express it tangibly. Maybe they couldn't bring back Harry's parents. Maybe they couldn't erase the trauma of that night. But they could ensure that Harry Potter would never want for anything. They could make sure that the boy who saved them all would be financially secure for life. With enough contributors, even small donations would add up to a significant amount. There's no canonical evidence for this, admittedly. It's pure speculation, but it's the kind of thing that makes sense for human, or wizard, nature. We see similar phenomena in our world after tragedies. Fundraisers, benefit concerts, donation drives. The wizarding world might have done the same for their tiny saviour. Here's another fascinating angle to consider. Royalties. If Harry's ancestors created famous potions that are still being manufactured and sold during his lifetime, and we know for a fact that they are, doesn't it stand to reason that Harry would be entitled to proceeds from those sales? In our world, if your great-great-grandfather invented something that companies are still producing, there would likely be some form of intellectual property rights or patent situation involved. Now, patents do eventually expire, and after a certain point, inventions enter the public domain. But we're talking about magical potions here, and we have no idea what the wizarding world's intellectual property laws look like. Given that wizarding society seems to be somewhat behind the times in many ways, they still use quills and parchment, for crying out loud. It's entirely possible that old-fashioned family recipes remain family property indefinitely. Maybe there's no equivalent of patent expiration. Maybe if your ancestor created a potion, your family gets a cut of the sales forever. If that's the case, Harry would be receiving regular income from scaly gross sales alone, which, given how often people seem to need bones fixed or regrown in the wizarding world, would be substantial. Add in Pepper Up Potion and Sleek Easy's hair potion, and you've got multiple revenue streams. Harry might not just be sitting on a static inheritance, he might be actively getting richer over time through passive income. This is never addressed in the books, probably because Harry's personal finances aren't really the focus of the story. But it's fun to imagine Harry getting monthly statements from Gringotts showing his royalty earnings. Dear Mr. Potter, your Scaly Grow royalties for November, 473 galleons. Your Pepper Up Potion royalties for November, 892 galleons. Your Sleek Easy's hair potion royalties for November, 1,247 galleons. The kid might be making more money sleeping than most wizards make working full-time. But let's step back from the in-universe explanations for a moment and talk about the meta-reason Harry is wealthy, because this is where things get genuinely poignant. J.K. Rowling has actually answered the question of why she made Harry rich, and her response is remarkably honest and human. In an interview, Rowling acknowledged that Harry's money is kept in Gringotts and came from inheritance through James Potter, but then she said something revealing. On the other hand, I think I really gave him a fortune because I was so broke when I wrote the first book, and it was wishful thinking that I would not have to worry about such things. Let that sink in. When Rowling was writing the scene where Harry discovers his vault full of gold, she was struggling financially. She was a single mother on welfare, writing in cafes because they were warmer than her flat, trying to make ends meet while pursuing this wild dream of being a published author. She had no publisher yet, no book deal, no money, and probably, if we're being honest, not a lot of concrete hope that any of that would change. Writing Harry as rich wasn't just a plot convenience, it was a form of catharsis. It was Rowling projecting her own desires onto her protagonist. In her real life, she had to worry constantly about money. She had to count every penny, make impossible choices about spending, and feel the grinding stress of poverty. But in the world she was creating, she could give her hero freedom from those worries. She could write a character who never had to wonder if he could afford school supplies, who never had to feel the shame and anxiety that comes with being broke. And here's the beautiful irony. By writing Harry as wealthy, while she herself was poor, Rowling was essentially writing her own future into existence. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone would go on to become one of the best-selling books of all time, launching a multimedia franchise worth billions. Rowling went from welfare to being wealthier than the Queen of England. Her wishful thinking about not having to worry about money became reality on a scale she probably never imagined, while sitting in those Edinburgh cafes. So, in a very real sense, Harry's wealth is a reflection of Rowling's hopes and dreams during one of the darkest periods of her life. Every time Harry opens his Gringotts vault and sees those mounds of gold, we're seeing what Rowling wished she could see when she opened her own bank account. It's a reminder that authors pour themselves into their work in ways both obvious and subtle, and sometimes the things we give our characters are the things we most desperately want for ourselves. Now, it's worth noting that despite Harry's enormous fortune, money never really becomes a major plot point in the series. Sure, Harry buys his school supplies and treats his friends occasionally, but the books aren't about Harry's wealth. He doesn't throw money around carelessly, he doesn't become spoiled or entitled, and he never seems to think of himself as particularly rich. In fact, Harry's relationship with money is remarkably healthy for someone who went from having nothing to having everything. He's generous. He tries to give his Triwizard Tournament winnings to Fred and George Weasley for their joke shop. He never makes Ron feel bad about his family's financial struggles. He doesn't flaunt his wealth or use it to gain social status. The money is just there, a resource he can use when needed, but not something that defines him. This is actually quite brilliant from a storytelling perspective. By making Harry wealthy, Rowling eliminated money as a source of conflict or stress in his life. Harry has plenty of other problems: an evil dark wizard trying to kill him, fame he never asked for, traumatic losses, the weight of prophecy. He doesn't also need to worry about whether he can afford textbooks or if he'll have enough money to eat. The wealth allows Rowling to focus on the story she actually wants to tell without getting bogged down in financial logistics. It also creates an interesting contrast with the Weasleys. The Weasleys are clearly struggling financially, and it's a source of real pain for them, particularly Ron, who feels overshadowed by his successful older brothers and embarrassed by his family's poverty. But Harry never treats the Weasleys differently because of money. If anything, he envies them for having a loving, intact family. The wealth disparity between Harry and Ron could have been a wedge in their friendship, but instead it becomes an opportunity to show that what really matters is loyalty, love and character, not gold in a vault. And speaking of the Weasleys, we should address that devastating comparison I mentioned at the beginning. When the Weasley family goes to Gringotts in Chamber of Secrets, we see that their vault contains exactly 1 galleon, plus a very small pile of sickles and a single connaught. It's absolutely heartbreaking, especially when you consider that Arthur works full-time, while Molly stays home to raise 7 children. Arthur has a job at the Ministry of Magic. It's not a prestigious position, and it's mentioned that he could make more money if he wanted to advance his career, but still, he's employed. The family isn't lazy or negligent. They're just struggling to make ends meet, which apparently is entirely possible in the wizarding world, despite magic being able to conjure most basic needs. The contrast between Harry's overflowing vault and the Weasleys' nearly empty one isn't meant to make Harry look bad, or the Weasleys look pathetic. Instead, it illustrates something important about economic inequality. It exists even in magical societies, and inherited wealth plays a huge role in determining someone's financial status. Harry did nothing to earn his fortune. He was born into it. The Weasleys work hard and are good people, but they'll probably never catch up to the accumulated wealth of centuries-old wizarding families. It's actually a fairly sophisticated bit of social commentary tucked into a children's book. Rowling is showing us that systemic inequality persists even when you add magic to the equation, and that being a good person doesn't automatically translate to financial success. The wizarding world, for all its wonders, still has the same economic disparities as the Muggle world. So what's the ultimate takeaway here? Harry Potter is rich because he inherited centuries of accumulated wealth from the Potter family, whose fortune was built on magical pharmaceutical innovations, primarily the creation of Scaligro, Pepper-Up Potion, and Sleekeazy's Hair Potion. His grandfather Fleamont quadrupled the already substantial fortune, and all of it passed to Harry after his parents and grandparents died. But on a deeper level, Harry is rich because J.K. Rowling, while broke and struggling, gave her protagonist the financial freedom she wished she had for herself. She couldn't afford to make Harry poor, not emotionally, not practically, not narratively. She needed him to be free from money worries so he could focus on saving the wizarding world. And in writing that wish fulfillment into her story, she created something that resonated with millions of readers and eventually made her wildest financial dreams come true. The Potter family fortune is more than just a convenient plot device. It's a reflection of generational success, smart business decisions, and the compound effects of long-term wealth accumulation. It's a commentary on inequality and inherited privilege, and it's a testament to the power of imagination. The idea that sometimes, when we're at our lowest, we can write the future we hope to have. Harry never asked to be rich. He didn't earn his fortune, and he doesn't particularly care about it beyond its utility. He'd trade every galleon in his vault for one more day with his parents. But the gold is there, stacked in Vault 687, a glittering reminder of a family legacy that stretches back 800 years to an eccentric wizard puttering around in his garden, creating potions that would change the wizarding world forever. And honestly, that's pretty magical all by itself. So the next time you read that scene where Hagrid tells Harry, "All yours," and Harry stands there in shocked silence, remember, you're not just seeing a kid discover he's wealthy. You're seeing the culmination of centuries of Potter family ingenuity, the projection of J.K. Rowling's hopes during her darkest days, and the beginning of a hero's journey that will prove money means nothing compared to love, courage, and the choice to do what's right. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check if my family tree has any eccentric 12th century ancestors who invented anything useful, you know, for research purposes.